we're here. We're live. Everything is working. So far, so good. Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Mxiety. I'm on tonight with Dr. Gurner. Did I pronounce that right? Oh boy.
Yes.
I didn't ask. Hi, Twinkie Talks. Hi, Laura. Hi, guys. Hi, Lauren. Thank you so much for being here. Hi, Jinx. Yes. Oh, I'm so excited. Oh, yay. All these people popped in. You guys were just quiet because you were waiting for us to say something. That's wonderful.
Yeah!
Oh.
What are we naming our baby?
I see some of my folks here as well. Alora's here. I see some other folks joining in.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. Jingram, hi. The Exception, hi. TD Bell, we're naming our baby Subdaddy. He's been subscribed for 9 months. That's so cool. You guys, I think my emote was instantly approved. Yep. So you should be able to use the 2 emotes now, just easily. Subdaddy Jr., right, yeah. You should be able to use both tier 1 emotes. I moved the tier 3 emote to 2 into that empty slot. So you guys should be good. Do you prefer Dr. G or I can't call
me whatever you like. You can call Dr. G's works for me. That's fine.
All right. Because I'm gonna be always nervous that I'm gonna mispronounce your last name, and it's just good. Yeah.
You can just call me G.
G.
Great street. It's great.
Yeah. New baby next month. P.
Twinkie Talks, thank you so much for resubscribing. Dawn Starlight for 13 months. You've been subscribed, Sunshine. Thank you so much, honey. Aww.
Yeah.
That is so wonderful. And I'm so happy to see you. Congratulations. Dawn Star just got engaged, everybody. Please give your congratulations in chat. Hi, Amos. Hi, nice to see you. Oh, you guys.
Yeah. Hi, love.
Good to see you.
Oh, lovely. Good. Yeah, heckin' congrats. Okay. All right. Everybody's just saying hi and congrats. Excellent. I'm so excited. Okay, so my moderators are here. Things are looking... Okay, you guys know about the emotes. I think we're good. So Dr. G, how was your day today? What's going on? What's new?
My day was amazing today. It was a busy day. I met with some people. I actually had a client that I talked with in Singapore this morning. So
oh my gosh. Yeah, that is cool.
So there's people all over the world, which is great. The internet gives us this ability to do that. But my day's been really busy. It's been fun. I love being here. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yay. That's wonderful. Do you prefer busy, or do you prefer like a little bit more of a relaxed kind of day?
You know what? I love having my only request every day is that I have at least an hour to get to the gym because it really grounds me. And everybody does something, I think, that keeps them grounded and makes them feel like I have some time to myself. So that's my me time. I put on some headphones, I go in there and I do my thing. And so as long as I get that hour, and usually there's like some 15-minute book-ons on each side, then I'm feeling good. So I like it to be busy, but I like to have that time to myself too. And, you know, I don't know how other people feel, but that's really the requirement. I try to have one day a week where I'm just at home. I have that luxury, so I'm just at home with my dog or hanging out, and I do like billing and other types of things, but it's really chill and you can kind of wear what you want and it makes life really nice. So that's what I like.
Wait, I was going to ask you something, but I think we're only 2 Dr. G, we're the only 2 from Dr. G's channel here. Maybe you guys might be so far, but who knows? There might be people still coming in. Hi, Serene.
I've seen Alora up there too. So Alora, Ames, JJ, there could be other ones around.
Oh, wonderful. Yay. Oh my gosh. And my people are slowly coming in.
All right.
So how do you manage it? Because people will say, like, I don't have time to go to the gym. So how do you manage your time when it is busy to, like, keep that hour open so that you could do that? Or do you just skip it some days and
I schedule it like a meeting. Like, I just say that I need to have this 1 hour, and I know, like, kind of what my client preferences are right now. So I say, it's just like the most important meeting you have is kind of with yourself. And I have to make sure
I love that.
I'm not good for anybody else. Like if I am burnout or I'm stressed, I don't bring my best to other people. So to me, I see it as like a service to them too, that I have to be good, because if I'm, you know, irritable or edgy or, you know, not taking care, and that has to do with like nutrition and sleep,
everything,
and all that stuff. So, you know, I hear stories sometimes, sadly, when I am doing things on other platforms, I'll hear stories like, oh, my therapist fell asleep on me, or like like horrible things. And I'm like, this is a person who doesn't take care of themselves, right? Like you have to be that person who gets the rest, goes to the gym, eats, decent foods, not always, but some of the time. And, so you can bring your best to other people, because otherwise you're kind of like the unwell giving advice, to people who are struggling too.
Right.
That's really helpful. So.
Right. Oh my goodness. Oh, falling asleep on some. But it's common. I mean, in professions where there's a role of a caregiver, like in general, doctors, and it's really easy for you guys to burn out, and I get it. I mean, there's sympathy fatigue. There's just the fact that you're constantly, again, you do have to be on your A game because you're setting an example for others. Like I don't know that I'd ever excuse somebody falling asleep on me, but I understand why it would happen, I guess.
I wouldn't, but the thing is, if you think about it, a lot of times, people are booked like, 50 minutes, and then the next person, you have that 10-minute window. And so you have to be able, a lot of times, you could hear very negative things or very difficult things, and you have to be able to be like, okay, like I'm ready for the next person. I'm clear. I'm, good to go.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to make sure that negative conversations or difficult conversations aren't your only conversations, right? So you have to make an effort to like make sure you reach out to friends, or you go out after and spend time with your spouse, or like you do things that kind of balance out your day. And I think that's good for everyone. You can't be all work all the time.
Right.
And so I try really hard to make sure that that's the case. At one point I worked at a prison, and I would go into the prison, and it would be completely dark when I went there, and it would be dark when I left.
Yep.
It felt like this weird, warped world. So, you do have to find ways of adjusting depending on what your setting is,
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. But that sounds rough.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And the gym thing is it's just got me thinking, and I'm kind of thinking out loud in half sentences, but that's okay. No, the thought's gone. The whole train has departed the station, and it's not coming back. It's something gym related. It might come around. Alora, thank you so much for that, host. That's so sweet of you. Thank you for sharing us with people who are popping into your channel. That means a lot. Well, so what brought you into the profession to begin with? Yeah.
I went into college thinking I would be a surgeon. I was like fascinated by the mechanics of it, right? Like fixing and like going in and being able to kind of repair something, and being able to kind of come back out of it and really helping another person in that way. And I was taking pre-med classes, and I was doing fine, but they were really boring to me. Like they were really dry.
Yeah.
And then I took a philosophy class, and I loved it. And then I was like, well, I can't really sit around and be a philosopher. Like that's not going to be like a real job. So I took a psychology class, and I was like, okay, this is a good bridge. It incorporates a lot of biology and science, and it also has this whole philosophical aspect. So I ended up being a psychology major with a minor in philosophy, and then went on to do, because obviously as a bachelor's with psychology really can't do anything. So I went on and then got my doctorate in clinical psychology, because with clinical, you had a lot of input from like the medical field. So you have a lot more biology, you have a lot more research background. You could still teach, you can still do therapy. So it gave me like the best opportunity to kind of do a variety of things. And I thought that would really bring the most skills like to the public. So I specialize actually in adult psychopathology and forensics, but adult psychopathology primarily. So like adults 18 and up with like, anything from like depression, mild depression to, severe schizophrenia. So that is like my range. And with kids or teenagers, I don't really know much. I've taken like 2 classes on that. So I'm probably not the person to ask any questions around kids or teenagers. I know probably as much as your aunt. So no joke.
Still probably a little bit more, I'd venture to say, compared to my aunt specifically. So you never, JJ says, I think of myself a little bit of a philosopher, just sitting around writing inane essays. Yeah, there you go.
For those of you who haven't read it, JJ writes incredible essays. So he's a great writer.
So they're not inane at all. Yeah, that's what Amos is saying too, you guys. All right, I see. You're just putting yourself down a little bit. Memphis Amori, I'm so sorry I missed your comment before. Hi, I hope you're okay. And Jinx apparently went to one of your streams before. That's really cool. Awesome. Wait a minute. Something is missing? What's missing? What's missing, TD Bell? I'm scared to find out. So you didn't like grow up, because people will describe like, oh, I knew I was going to do this forever. You didn't grow up like taking care of people, or no, like there was nothing.
No, I grew up as a farm girl. Like I loved animals. I loved I grew up with cows and chickens and horses and all sorts of things. I love like animals. And so to me, like as I was growing up, we would always, and this is part of again, maybe this is a terrible reason for wanting to be a surgeon, but like we grew up very poor. And so like when you'd like break a toe or break a finger, like you just stuck like a popsicle stick on that and wrapped it up and you hope for the best. Like you kind of fixed yourself. So part of my interest in like surgery and that kind of stuff was really kind of fixing. But what I realized is like connecting with animals and connecting with people, that there's something really special and transformative about that. And for me, it wasn't really a difficult slide into saying like, you know, animals are special and precious, and there's ways you can connect with them. And with people, you know, they're not really that different in some ways. Like
Right.
you can have a bond with them that can really transform your life and their life as well. And so kind of getting into that and approaching it, I think, more from a clinical aspect has been beneficial for me, because I'm not approaching it like, you know, oh, I came from a background that, you know, leads me to be, you know, not objective in something. Like I walk into every meeting being really objective about helping people truly get to the root and fix their issues. And, you know, I don't bring any kind of baggage with that. And I'm very thankful for that, you know, that I'm not bringing a perspective that's skewed by, you know, some other thing or, you know, something else. But I genuinely am in it to help other people and to make their lives better. And seeing that makes my life better. I mean,
so beautiful.
Seeing them live a better life. I had a wonderful client, and I'll just be brief because I don't want to take up too much of this time so people have questions. But I think the best example of that and something that really impacted me is I had a client who was a young man who was a victim of some abuse by a trusted family friend.
Oh my goodness.
And he was abused for quite a long time. But at the end of session, probably, you know, like a year later, he handed me this piece of cloth. And I was like, you know, what's that? I mean, it literally was like this piece of cloth. And he's like, I just want you to have this. It's a piece of my baby blanket. And I wanted to let you know you gave me like my childhood back. And I was just like, I still have that piece of cloth. Like it meant so much to me and was such like a thoughtful gift. So those are the moments that like make anything worth it, when you can have that kind of impact. So to me, that's the best.
That is, yeah, Jinx, I also got goosebumps. That's so beautiful. That's such what a small thing. That's such a huge honor for somebody to trust you with something like, oh my goodness. That's so sweet. So sweet. Ina, thank you so much for resubbing, you wonderful soul. And we're also having a Twitch baby. You have to tell me what we're naming our Twitch baby. 9 months and everything. But that's super cool. Thank you. Kawabunga, hi! Nice to see you. That is so powerful. So you didn't necessarily set out to do this, but like you're doing it for all the right reasons, and I think that's absolutely delightful. That's
I think
wonderful. Sometimes
like there's a lot of pressure on people to like find their passion, and that they all have to know exactly what they want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that I think sometimes it's just about openness. Like if you're open and you're willing to like explore different avenues and you don't close yourself off, you don't know when that passion will find you, that you don't always have to know everything. I think that's a lot of pressure. Like I didn't know. I thought I knew going in, you know, and my life took a completely different direction. And I think that, you know, I'm very grateful for that. And by the way, for everybody watching, I never give any details that could identify anybody. So if I'm talking about someone, it could be a different gender, it could be different circumstances. So just putting that out there so people have anonymity.
Thank you for the disclaimer. Propoki, hi, hello, you. Thank you for coming by. I majored in journalism for a while, but switched to psychology in the end. Oh, did I know that? I feel like I did know that. I think. Serene September says animals are better than most people. I can't disagree, but I like this whole idea that you're talking about, Dr. G, about like we can connect with people in a certain way. So like there's all these flaws that people have that makes us say like animals are better than people, but if you could be part of the solution in a way, you know?
Right.
I mean, like that.
Yeah, I think that sometimes it's all about like perspective, right? I mean, we all have flaws, and I think if we're able to be humble about our own, it's easier to see through the flaws of other people.
Yeah. Oh, I like that too. I was co-editor of the college newspaper, wrote articles, but it turned out it wasn't for me. Really tightened up my writing though, and I write very oh, got it. Oh, that's neat. That's really neat, Jinx. So let's move into kind of like the real nitty-gritty. So what are you so I know you said that you're you did clinical psychology, and so what is your focus now other than the adult population? What is it that you do right now?
Right now, I'm actually an executive and performance coach. So I use my knowledge of the brain not just to make like ill people better, but to make people who are functioning well perform like at their optimal level. And what you find is that a lot of times these people are making the same like kind of mistakes in thinking or perception that other people can make, but they just have less consequence. So like, for example, someone who's very depressed or struggling with anxiety are going to really struggle with, how they think about the events that happen. And those thoughts determine how they feel about things, and those feelings determine how they behave. So when people are functioning at a high level, they also can have thoughts about their situations that, can actually be obstacles to their own growth or performance or mood or other types of things as well. So I do that primarily right now. And so I run like, my own stream on Twitch and do other things like on Quora just to kind of give back, because I realized that, solid mental health information is really hard to find. I mean, you can go to like the Mayo Clinic or some of those more reputable websites, but you're going to find a lot of definitions and not things that really can always speak to you or your specific.
Well, there's a huge difference between reading a definition and having somebody sit down and explain it to. I mean, it was a part of the reason that I started streaming live, because people asked me, they're like, why Twitch? Why not just make videos on YouTube? And it was because of this connection that I have with people that I otherwise would not be able, like sitting down and being able to discuss what is depression, what are different levels of depression, how do you experience, like all of that fascinates me so much. And so to be able to have, like, to be sitting on a platform where I could do that live, that's the coolest part.
Right. And I think there's so much interesting information that like people just never get because they don't have the opportunity, or to ask questions about things like, oh, how do you know, somebody had asked the question, I think on your Twitter.
Yes.
Like, how do you know the difference between, I just feel kind of down for a few days versus experiencing like depression? And I thought that was such a great question, because it's questions like that you get all the time. And, they're not going to go see somebody to answer that question.
Right.
That's not, reasonable unless they're kind of impaired by that. So when we look at a question like that, you say, well, okay, depression, if it depends on what we're talking about, right? Depression happens in a number of different illnesses that we see. So there's major depressive disorder, which is what most people think of as depression. And so to have a depressive episode, what we'd say is qualifies, you have to be struggling with depression, for 2 weeks or more to have it count as like a depressive episode. Now, obviously some people are going to flex in that. Like some people will have like 4 weeks or what have you, but that's different even than like something like dysthymia, which, to get a diagnosis of dysthymia is like, you have to feel down more days than not for 2 years or more. So like there are different like kind of categories there. But for that gentleman, like a few days of feeling down, there's so much more I'd want to know, right?
Yes.
So I'd want to know, was that sparked because your girlfriend or boyfriend broke up with you? Like,
right.
Is there an event that's linked to that? If so, it's probably not depression. If it's just a few days, people have normal mood fluctuations, and you can feel down and sad and like crap for a few days and have it not necessarily be depression. I think what confuses it sometimes is we use the lingo like I feel so depressed, right?
Right.
When you feel kind of down or sad or, some of those things. So yeah, I mean, that's, I guess my general take on that, if that makes sense.
No, well, I mean, it makes a ton of sense to me, and I appreciate that. I think it's a pretty common question. We do have a bunch of other questions that, like, absolutely, let's dive into. So what I did is in my Discord, I asked people to submit a few questions if they had any. And so, like, that's the questions that we're going to go off of. I want to make sure we acknowledge chat. When you Google depression or mental health, there's so much cruft out there. It's hard for people to pick out which parts are reputable. 100%. 100. And there's so much reputable stuff that gets buried by all the crap that Google brings up, because it's like 5 ways to know if you're depressed, and it might not be a reputable source, but it's going to pop up at the top there. And if that's what you click and that's where you get your information, that really sucks. And to speak to what you were saying with people being able to ask questions live, you need to have a space to ask those silly, like those sillier questions, even that's like, why can't I just get up and get out of bed? Why am I not motivated? Do I have to be motivated? Why can't I feel positive? Like all of those things that if you went, the way I say it, like if you went to, just a family member and told them, you might either, catch them off guard, and they might get concerned, and like you can't just ask that on a in a regular conversation.
Right.
BuzzFeed is a reputable source. Yes, Star. Yes, I like your Kappa. I find the ICD-10, ICD-11 definitions by WHO, which are available online. They are right, but again, those are definitions, but they are very reputable. You're right.
Absolutely.
Feelings of hopelessness, worthlessness, guilt, suicidal ideations, etc. are primary symptoms. Yes. Hi, that girl, Bryce. Hi. I get anhedonia with it too, pretty deeply. Just the lack of happiness from normally great stuff. Wow.
What's kind of interesting is in the anhedonia is that what we know is that the reward center of the brain is actually kind of muted during depression, so that you're not like you feel sometimes like you're making that up, like I just don't feel pleasure and that's my fault somehow. But really that area of the brain that normally would make you feel happy or rewarded or pleasure is actually kind of muted, so you're not able to do that. So it's
not your fault.
It's not your fault. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things people really misunderstand is that, because it's not a visible problem, they don't get the fact that you literally cannot do these things. If you had a broken arm, no one would expect you to like go out and play softball, because they know like you literally can't throw the ball. But with anything that's emotional or, psychological, they just expect you can still throw the softball, and that's a big mistake. It makes people feel guilty and like, they're making it up.
Well, that, and then what JJ is saying, that's super important, similar to negative symptoms of schizophrenia experience, athymia, alagia, I hope I didn't pronounce that. Yeah. Asociality, anhedonia, evolution, apathy were the negative symptoms of schizophrenia, similar to depression. That is, so when you see that kind of stuff, like that's where I get scared. You're going to Google what's depression, and maybe you have schizophrenia. Maybe you have, maybe it is just anxiety. It's not anxiety and depression. And you're sitting there self-diagnosing yourself because that's the tool you have access to easily. And we're all looking to kind of quickly soothe those nervous feelings that we get when we're like, something's not right. Something's not right.
Right. And I think that feeling of something's not right is usually a really good cue for people to dig further, as long as you're doing it in a reputable place, like ask somebody who kind of knows, or mention it to your primary care doctor, or kind of that's a time to do that. But you're right. I mean, I think that then they get really scared. I mean, I've had more than one person who seriously came into an office saying, I think I have schizophrenia, and they don't, but maybe they saw like a 60-minute special on or bipolar disorder, and they saw this, or they saw a medication commercial where they say, like, for example, for bipolar disorder, they'll see like a medication commercial and they're like, do you have times when you feel up and times when you feel down? And I'm like, who doesn't, right?
Right.
So then they ask like these ridiculous questions, and it gets people really concerned. Or they'll be like, I always used to know when there was a 60-minute special on like bipolar disorder, whatever.
Oh my gosh.
Next morning, I would have, whenever you used to have landlines, I would have this like blinking red light, and I would just press them, and it would just be person after person saying like, I think I might have bipolar disorder. I have this, particular symptom. And, you have to be really cautious around that too, because oftentimes, how we self-diagnose is not necessarily accurate. Like, I understand most people will understand when they struggle with anxiety or depression, but you don't really know where that's linked. So like, you may have depression, but you may end up having something like, cyclothymia or, bipolar 1 or 2, and you may not have like just major depressive disorder. You may have like an anxiety, like an experience of anxiety, but that may be, due to something really simple around a medication side effect and not necessarily, something else. So there's a lot of different origins some of these emotions can be attached to. And I think that's really important. For example, with depression, people can experience clinical depression because their thyroid levels are off. So like something as simple as like, I just didn't get my physical this year and they didn't test your thyroid, could really prevent you from going through so much difficulty, for the many months or even years to come. So that's one reason why, like, if you are experiencing any kind of mental health issue, the first thing that I would do is like make sure you get a physical, get your blood work done, ask about medication side effects.
And a good doctor will tell you that. They'll like, I've had doctors who said that I had to get my blood work done before the appointment or they would not prescribe me medication until I had blood work brought to them.
Smart. Yeah, absolutely smart. And so you want to make sure that like this isn't just a simple correction, like taking a thyroid pill would make you feel better.
Yeah. Okay, back to chat, non-reputable stuff. Yeah. Getting, yes. And then it doesn't help that other people will Google that stuff for you and then start pushing onto you that, hey, you know what? Actually, you have this. And actually, you could just solve it by doing this. And yeah. But a good doctor, whether it's your primary physician, whoever you are comfortable going to, will tell you all of these things. What Dr. G is saying, you'd hear that.
Yeah, that's why you should absolutely, talk to your doctor as a first like line of defense and not be too invested in, your own research kind of diagnosis. Yeah. Also, like sometimes it can be hard because, parents will also make their own assumptions about what's going on with your mood or behavior. And you want to make sure that, you do have experts and you aren't made to feel guilty. I've had clients who like their parents are telling them they're lazy, but they're really struggling with depression, and those are very different things. So it's important to get medical assistance if you are feeling like that.
Oh, I love it. It's all the stuff that I like saying and I feel like a broken record. So it's really nice to have somebody else say it. Cora is very opinionated on my diagnosis. When I used to post on there, I trusted the professionals at the end of the day, but don't rely on internet trolls to diagnose you, basically. So how do you feel about Quora? Because I know it's one of the social media links that you provided for me, and it's somewhere that you frequent. So
I do. Like Quora is actually probably my biggest channel. So as far as when we're talking about people reading answers and things like that, I approach it from a really basic perspective where I'm going to answer questions for people on like, how does therapy work questions around like just things like how does a therapist deal with transference, or what should I tell my therapist when, I haven't really been doing everything I should be, or, some of those really more personal ones. But I stay away from things that are really super specific, like any kind of medication question. Yeah. I always feel sad, as we've talked about, that like people are turning to the internet instead of turning to their doctor for information like that. So always turn to your doctor if you have med questions because they know you best.
But it's scary. It's scary because there's not I don't, in some areas there's not a lot of options for a second opinion, and in other situations you can't afford a second opinion, or you can't afford to wait because you're really not feeling well. And none of those things actually justify going to the internet and relying on the internet, but that's how people get there, and it's very upsetting.
Totally understand that. Yeah. So, and then I answer basic questions around like certain diagnoses and how you treat them. Everything from like, one person asked something about like, how do you know, like, how can you treat someone with narcissism, or how can you, some of these different questions like that. So I try to dive in and give people some information on that stuff. And I think it's a lot of fun, but also I try to give people a behind the scenes look at like, this is how we really think about it. These are the things we don't say. These are the things we're looking at. These are the ways in which we're ruling out like what you actually have. So I try to give people that perspective too, because we're all people, but we're trying to figure it out as well. And a lot of the information, is about, like, some people get very upset around, hospitalization, and giving people an understanding of how people at the hospital view it too. Like, most people who are psychologists who work within a hospital system, as I used to, we are equally frustrated with the inability to, like, treat people as we wish we could.
Right.
And it's a very, you're not alone in that. And I think sometimes getting that validation can be helpful too,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. JJ rubbing in that there's better health insurance out there. Sheesh, we know. But yeah, recommending exercise. Exercise is a part of the equation, and that's what Dr. G was talking about in the very beginning. I mean, exercise is a great way to keep yourself in balance, but if that's not what's going to keep you from feeling suicidal or from going through a very low period, just because you're getting, if your chemicals aren't working correctly, then you can exercise all you want, but your dopamine, your serotonin aren't pumping out the right way. So you're like, if there's a chemical imbalance, which is very hard, I understand, to pinpoint, but if it is chemically imbalance related, your exercise will help. And again, of course, everybody should be exercising. Even like walking 30 minutes a day will do wonders. And there's no doubt about it that, like, if you have a very stationary life, you get up and start doing something, you might feel, you'll probably feel a little bit better. But is it a cure? It's not a cure. It's the same way where people where people will talk about those, like, sad lamps, right?
Yes.
And they'll be like, well, I don't understand, because I was staring, I put on the light as long as I was supposed to, and I didn't feel a difference. And I was like, well, you think it was going to get you out of bed and get you dressed and brush your teeth and brush your hair? Like, it's a light, and it's going to help, stuff synthesize in your body. But at the end of the day, like, it's not your cure. It's all of these little things together.
Yeah, I think what people fail to realize sometimes, and like, I'm a huge fan of exercise for a lot of reasons. One is that, it can really help your brain it kind of forces it to give you some endorphins or some things that it doesn't want to give you otherwise, because you're really in the point where you're struggling. And some of the sad lamps, same thing, like, it's giving you some, like, neurotransmitter assistance. But you're right in that if you're not kind of taking care of the root, which a lot of us, at least my perspective is always from a cognitive behavioral perspective, I try to look at, well, what works and what works most quickly. So that's kind of where my bent is. So, like, if you're not looking at, like, thought patterns, if you're not looking at, how they're functioning, and if they're not able to examine those things, you aren't going to have the lamp is not going to be magic. You are completely spot on with that. It may give some people some amount of relief depending on who you are, but these things should be co-occurring with other themes.
Right. And it's great. It's great. It's part of your toolbox. It's building up this toolbox. It's that. Absolutely. And also coloring soothes you when you're feeling anxious. Like, all of those things are great, but they need to work together. There's not going to be one thing that you just, even medication, you can't, it's not, it seems like it is, but it's not. You don't just take a pill and feel better.
And that's why also we have black box warnings on medication.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people don't understand the reason why, antidepressants have gotten that black box warning where, they say, oh, they can lead to suicide, they can lead to these types of behaviors, is that, when people are very, very depressed, they are actually not as high risk for attempting some of these things. But once you give them an antidepressant and they still have all the same thoughts, they're not in treatment, they're not talking to anyone, and you're giving them an antidepressant without anyone else kind of working with them and talking with them, it sets them up at a higher risk. Yeah. So you want to make sure that, like, medication is part of your overall treatment plan. Exercise is part of your overall treatment plan, but that you do have an expert involved somewhere in there, and that you're touching base with that person on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Because that's their job, is to, like, help you out and to get you to the next level. And they should be doing that and making you feel better, sooner than later.
Yeah. And to Jinx's point, there is no insecure, but I mean, it's very understandable that we look for one, right? Yeah. Because who wants to keep suffering? It seems like The way our minds work, it seems like we're always with depression, with anxiety, with these mental health issues that are invisible illnesses. It seems like you're always one step away from unlocking a puzzle. Like that's what it, especially like I'll go into my therapist's office and I'll have an epiphany because she said something to me and it really struck a chord, and all right, and I walked out of there and I started thinking about something in a different way, and a few days later, I'm like, well, that still wasn't the cure-all. What the heck? And it's, but in it, and I can't help but think that way, even though I know, after 10 years of, going to therapists and taking medication, I know that that's not how it works. And I know that that's not, I've seen the progress that I have made. I've seen the difference that doing those things have made, but never once have I walked out of a doctor's office and been like, well, PTSD's cured, got that off the list. So What else do we have? We have some OCD in here. All right, we got to work on that next. Like I wish that's how it worked. And every time I'm like, maybe this time, maybe with this disease.
Well, on my end, I think that the way I always view it, is like having asthma, right? This is a good analogy. Hang in there with me.
No, go for it.
People who have asthma, like you look out the window and you're struggling. I was one of these kids, so I'm speaking just for myself. So
right.
You look out the window, you see kids playing, they're out in the cold, and you can't do that without wheezing, and it's terrible. But you find a really good doctor. You get on some interesting medication that, you figure it out. Not every medication is going to work, but you figure out one that kind of works. You figure out what your triggers are. And then you kind of build your life to where it's so functional over time. You learn kind of how to manage it so much that you almost can get to a point where you can forget you have it. Like you always have to manage it. You have to be aware it's there. But the goal of the treatment at the end of the day isn't that you're going to eradicate it. Like there's never going to be a point in my life where I go, oh, you just never have asthma anymore. It's cured. Like that's not how it works. But the goal is that you become so functional and you learn how to manage it so well, and that, your body's able to respond to these things. Like in an ideal world, that you can live with it and still kind of almost forget. It's not a prominent feature in your life every day. It's one of many aspects about you that you have to kind of be aware of, and it's in the back of your mind, but it isn't something that's like taking up a lot of space. So that's what you kind of hope for when you're kind of treating someone, is you never want to give them the impression like, oh, 6 months with me and you're, completely cured, and you walk out dancing and everything is better.
Although insurances make you believe that will be the case, but that's a different story.
And insurance dictates treatment, and that makes it very hard too. Like insurance will sometimes tell you, look, this client has 10 sessions a year.
Yes.
And, what do you do with
That's
that?
what I'm referring to. Yeah. So you
spread it out, and you say, well, I'm going to see you every 3 weeks, and I hope that's okay, but that's better than seeing you every week and only for,
right, 2 months. Right. Yeah.
So you got to work with what you got. And sometimes insurance companies will say, hey, why isn't this person on medication? Or why aren't they on this particular medication? And that really starts getting sticky because they start to dictate how treatment works instead of the doctor who's working with them.
Yeah. Sorry. I know I pick on insurance a lot. No, it's because it's such a sore topic for me, like instantly. Just I remember exactly that, where I was going through a very tough time and I was going to see my therapist, and she goes, so I have to tell you, and I didn't know this until this session, this is the last session I can have with you for this year. Wow. And it was December. So it was could have been worse. But she was like, this is the last session I can have with you that's covered by insurance. Let's figure out a payment, whatever, right? And I was like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, you only have 26 sessions or something a year, and you went over, or you're like approaching them, and I just being blown away by because that's not how mental illness works. That's right. That's like telling somebody like, well, after 10 weeks, you can't get insulin anymore. It's just, you're just not going to be diabetic. I don't know. You get this much insulin. I don't know what you want.
I know.
Yeah. It's just so bizarre to me that the system, how could we talk about mental health equality and destigmatization when our insurance, our healthcare system isn't even caught up totally?
I think we have to see mental illness as the same as any other medical illness as a start.
Yes.
Like it shouldn't be, to me, it shouldn't necessarily be a separate benefit. Like, you say like, okay, we parse out like dental benefits, you have this many teeth cleanings, or mental health benefits. But what if it was just like, look, you have medical care, this is part of your medical care, and then trying to really work then on that end to advocate, because then you have more advocates. I think the problem is with mental health, because so many people don't want to kind of talk about it and keep it fairly stigmatized, there's not a lot of conversation that gets to the places of power. Whereas with medical care, when you say, oh, my son needs rehabilitation after, they lost their leg, or, hearing aids or something like that, we all kind of jump on that and say, of course they do, right? But I think that we need more advocates. Like when you look at the illnesses that receive more treatment, more attention, they have advocates. Like autism gets more advocates because parents are on board and they care and they're vocal and they kind of are there, but there's not a lot of that same push. Like you think about it, schizophrenia is 1 in 100 folks. There's not a big push that I hear out there for like treatments or some of that stuff. So yeah, I just think that we need more vocal advocacy and to kind of see it like everything else. And part of the stuff like what you're doing helps to take away that stigma, and I think makes people more likely to speak up. And it's such an important thing.
Yeah, well, thank you. You're doing it too. So no discount for you there. Absolutely. All right. So I do want to make sure we answer questions. I want to say, Toad, I don't want to mispronounce it. Toadstool Studio. Thank you so much for the follow. And I lost your username. It's somewhere here in the abyss, and I can't find it. But I appreciate so much that you followed. Is not lost on me. Okay, so we have a few questions here, and I did want to make sure. Yeah, this whole thing where so and so is just crazy as an explanation for when things start. Team Toad House. Thank you. Yes. I lost it because it was like it scrolled up immediately. Thank you so much, Dawn Star, one of my wonderful mods. Okay, question. Is it fairly easy to tell when a patient is not trying their hardest or is only going through the motions from your end of things?
It depends. And I'm going to be completely honest. I think most of the time in a clinical setting, and I'm going to make a kind of a distinction here, but in a clinical setting, I always assume that if they're invested in treatment, that they're doing their best. I start from that place. I'm always making that.
Well, you have to, otherwise it's a very jaded place to start. Otherwise, yeah.
Yeah. So I always make the assumption that they're doing their best in a clinical setting, and that if they can't, if they're struggling, that they're honest with me. I mean, that's just kind of the I guess the way that I expect it to function. So as far as not being able to tell, I think, when I do therapy, I have homework. Like my clients work their tail off and they're expected to, and they know that out of the gate. So I think that, when they come back and like they don't have that stuff done, we have a conversation about it. Like I have them keep thought journals and stuff like that and rework thoughts and, do all that kind of stuff. And if they come back and there's like nothing, I say, well, kind of what's going on. And if there is something that's like a genuine struggle there, they're having some kind of setbacks, that's one thing. But I think we really have to have a chat if they're like, well, I kind of didn't feel like it. And then I think we have to have a different conversation. But usually when I'm doing work, it's very apparent whether they're doing stuff or not because it's tangible. So they have to be reworking stuff all the time. And we have a conversation, and it's my job in part to push people a little bit. I think it's always your therapist is always going to have their unique temperament. And I think mine is definitely like, I'm going to push you to a wall here and you're going to be uncomfortable and it's going to suck a little bit, but trust me and hang in there. And this can be better on the other side. Yeah. I try to make the agreement that like, when you walk in the door, you may not leave like I am cured, but you will leave being better than you are right now if you give me the time. And this is what I think you have. Like, these are, the methods by which, we use for this particular problem. I try to really lay it out I give them stuff to read. I want them to really be an expert. And, so is it obvious? It is obvious in like the homework they do. But I always hope that our relationship is one that facilitates, that really facilitates the kind of honesty where I don't have to do any digging. Got it. And I have a cat here. Do you see my cat's tail?
Oh, I do see a cat. That's funny. It's just walking in front now.
Yeah, she does. She's something else.
Well, they all are. You guys, by the way, if you hold on before I lie to you, open. If you type in exclamation Q, the letter Q, and then your question, immediately after that, your question will be added to a queue, and then we can respond to them in a timely fashion. So the questions that I'm asking were asked before, but if you would like to ask another question, please do let me know, and I will be sure to tag that on. And they'll be in this little queue. Okay. Also, how do people tell when we are trying our hardest? I never feel like I'm doing my best, but since I have low self-esteem, I don't know if that's accurate.
Good question. I think that, any evidence that I see of people, you can tell when people are trying and working because they come with like a very genuine, like, I guess they come with like, I want to say like a genuine heart, like a genuine presentation. They're there, they're saying like, I ask them, well, what was your week like? They report things that are consistent with their illness. Like I look for consistency.
Yeah.
If people are reporting like, that they were, struggling with anxiety, I expect that when things are not going well, that they can give me symptoms that seem consistent with the illness that they have. And when things are off for me is when they're like, well, I just didn't feel like it because I wanted to hang out with my friend or I wanted to do this. That's when like, your commitment to therapy starts to be like, well, I don't know if this is a good fit for you right now. Like you have to be willing to put in the effort. So yeah, I think that, as far as people being committed or doing their best, I just look for them to attempt. They don't have to get stuff right. They don't have to do it all, but there just has to be an attempt there to meet me halfway. And I always tell people, it's like anything else. Like I can't be more motivated than you are. Like I can't want you to be better more than you want to be better.
Yeah, but that's just the dead end because I always want you to be better. But if you don't want to be better, then there's nothing I could do. There's
nothing I can do. And it got to the point at one point. I used to have couples, which are always fascinating. Yeah. But couples are wild, and now I refer them to someone else who's deals with couples. But because couples don't come until they absolutely hate each other.
Oh,
they come too late. Like I want them to start having some communication problems and come to therapy. That is my dream. But they come when they have already kind of deconstructed each other emotionally and really filled with like in such a terrible place.
Right.
And navigating those dynamics. But the reason why I bring that up is because oftentimes you'll have one person of the couple who doesn't want to be there, doesn't think they should be there,
right,
doesn't want to do that work, and I just didn't feel like that is something that anyone should really have to work with. Like if you don't want to be here, I don't want you to be here either. Like
So how do you? Because we've had this question asked to other therapists before. How do you respond when somebody is like, "Well, I have to be here because such and such." Go home. Yeah, you're like, I don't need you.
I don't continue. Like, I don't need you as a client. Like, I mean, you are here. There are 1,000 people waiting in line to get an appointment who want to get better. If you don't want to be here and you're entitled and your girlfriend sent you or your husband sent you or whatever, like go home and let someone take that seat who wants to be there and wants to be well. Like, I don't need to convince you. I take a pretty hard line. Like maybe your viewers here are going to think like, oh my God, she's such a bitch. Like, but I kind of like, that's kind of how I feel about it. Like,
no, I totally agree, but I've gotten a different answer and I'm sorry, I'll let you finish before I tell you, but
I mean, that's kind of how I feel about it. And when I was first starting out, I took people, who didn't really want to be there. In fact, I took people who were compelled by the court to be there. For example, like someone who, they said, oh, you need anger management, you have to go to therapy.
Right.
Well, what you don't realize is that the therapist isn't required to provide it. Like, just because you're required to get it, if you don't want to be there, nobody has to take you as a client. So at first I assumed that like, oh, I should take this person, they're required to be here, whatever. And it was a disastrous experience because the person didn't want to participate, wasn't engaged. And I knew I had like, 20 other people who like are dying for a spot.
Right.
Here's this guy like doing nothing, wasting everyone's time, trying to tick a box when there is somebody genuinely struggling who wants to be better. So after that experience, I was like, no more of this. And so I genuinely don't see anybody who doesn't want to be there ever.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I like that.
Stance. And some people don't like it and some people do, and I've had some people come back, and I've had others not come back, but it is completely their choice. Like, I want you to get better. I will go to bat for you. I will do all the research. I will bring to you everything I have. And if I can't help you out, I will refer you to a specialist who can. Like, I will do everything I can, but I'm not spending all that energy on somebody who like isn't with it, isn't, in it to win. So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, no, I love that. Jingram, JJ, and Mickey Jones, thank you so much for following. We absolutely do not interrupt our guests. Oh, by the way, we have a button for that one. But it's a pleasure to have you here. I like that approach. I think it's kinder than trying to treat people who won't even try while people who do their best sit in the wings. Yeah, absolutely. So the other answer I've gotten to that was, we sit down and we try to figure out what it is, what's going on, and I try to see if I can find for them the incentive to be there. And I was like, that's certainly, very nice way to go about it. Like, that's, but that to me, that's kind of babysitting.
Yeah. Good luck. I mean, like, I don't want to, the thing is, I can't find, I guess, I see it like anything, like addiction. I can't make you want to stop using drugs. Like, you have to be ready.
Yep.
And I think that, like, even with any kind of struggle that we all have, you have to be at a place where you're like, look, I don't want to be like this anymore. I want to really try, no matter what it takes. Like, I want to try. And sometimes I understand that for everybody, that's going to look different. Like, for some of my clients, they are incredibly depressed, and trying for them is just getting to an office, and that's awesome. And you have to meet people where they're at, but it doesn't mean that I don't recognize your motivation no matter what level it's at. You don't have to be like, I'm pumped and ready and let's do all the work, but you still have to want to be different and be willing to take those chances. And that's I recognize people on the spectrum. So I didn't want people to get the impression I expect everybody to be like, I'm so stoked, because if you're in that place,
yeah, yeah, you probably wouldn't be at a therapist's office, maybe. Right. I don't know.
So, like, that's kind of how I see it.
Okay, so I want to make sure that we're also conscious of your time. How you feeling about your time?
We're doing all right.
Okay.
Do you feel like things are well?
Yeah, I think so. I think everything's wonderful. So let's start. Let's get into some questions. We'll bounce back to the questions I have in Discord, but let's answer some questions from the audience. So you guys, once again, that's !Q, and then just ask your question, and that puts your question into a queue so that we can respond to them in a timely manner. So the first question was, it's a little off topic, but says JJ, after posting my work, a few fellow schizophrenics seem to have an illness of varied experience. For example, I have a disconnection from reality, while others say they're intimately connected with reality. I feel like it's an insight that not many schizophrenics have that means that I can sense this disconnection. Is anyone right in this circumstance, or is it completely subjective?
I think that everyone's experience, this is a good question, JJ. I think everyone's experience of their illness can vary. I think that we all just have to recognize, sorry about my cat. She's like so intrusive.
No, everybody loves your cat. Everybody loves it. Animals are the best. And we talk about, I mean, maybe not in this case, but it's tough. We talk about really heavy topics. So whenever there's an animal in the background, that's a little bit of a distraction from, maybe what's going on. It's always great. So please don't feel bad.
Experience of their illness is different. And, whether that is experiencing, like, whether you're talking about reality and schizophrenia, or you're talking about depression, like, even with depression, some people will say that they can't sleep. They have terrible insomnia. Other people say that they oversleep. Right?
Yeah.
That they sleep all the time.
It's a great example.
So it's just a varied experience of what people, but both of them are struggling with depression. So I think that you have to make that allowance of subjective experience. And what's so wild is that, a lot of times people will use that as like saying, well, maybe I don't really struggle from the same thing. There is that variation, and it's okay. It's still like a form of reality, a distortion of reality in some sense, right? So when we're looking at schizophrenia, and he's like, well, one is feeling so intimately and intensely connected, one's feeling disconnected. There's still some kind of a reality that's being distorted there or changed from the average person's experience. So just like with depression, the impact is still on sleep, even though that's impacting it in very different directions.
Well, and I've seen, kind of talking to your second point, so I I do not have an eating disorder. I haven't had an eating disorder for quite a while, but I am familiar with the eating disorder like community on Twitch and Twitter, and I see, not on Twitch, but on Twitter and social media, and I see that like there is a struggle of well, my anorexia isn't as bad because I eat sometimes versus this person and they're much skinnier than I am, and just this whole like I think it's we're socially taught that like somebody has it worse, right? And therefore I'm supposed to feel okay about it, but that just like it's not a good connection. It's not.
That's a great example. Like,
Yeah.
I've definitely seen with the eating disorder community, like someone will say, well, I'm still menstruating, so therefore I don't have anorexia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still like, and you have to realize too that you're not, to have an illness, you don't have to have every single symptom of every single,
Yeah.
in every single
Yeah.
box. So,
Yeah.
I think that's also, and there are levels of severity and all those things that you're speaking to. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of room on that for interpretation, but we do like to say that we're better than, or, we're not connected to that particular group.
Yeah. Jinx asked, if you're not allowed to feel bad if someone has it worse, only one person gets to feel bad and they have it really, really bad.
That's a great comment.
It is, yeah. Jinx asks, I don't remember if I asked this before, but I only get to see my therapist every 4 to 8 weeks, often closer to the higher end. How poorly do you think this can affect an outcome? How useful is it compared to once a week or once every other week?
It's a good question. I think that one of the things that it's always more beneficial to see them on a weekly basis, obviously, because you can check in more regularly and have a touch point there where you can, make adjustments and touch base with someone who can help you navigate your space a little bit more effectively. But if you're spreading it out over 8 weeks, I think that when you're talking about how does it affect outcomes, you're looking at kind of the differences. It may just kind of delay those outcomes a little bit, or you may say, well, maybe your therapist is able to structure it so that every week you have certain things you're working on, and then you check in on like that 8th week or that 6th week. They may structure it so you check in by email doing something midway. So there's a lot of different ways in which people navigate that. And if you're feeling for some reason that like that's too long of a space, then that's something I'd definitely bring up with them in session and see if you can't get something worked out so that you have more of a specific directive. Like you could say, okay, during this week, I'm really going to work on this. Next week, I'm going to really work on that. And maybe even like, toward the end and keep a log and then, kind of review that at your 8-week mark. Sometimes what we do is as people are getting better, we spread out sessions, so maybe you're already doing quite well in that, they believe you only really need that touch point. But outcomes, you can still have a very good outcome. It's just a matter of how you and your therapist are navigating that space in between sessions. Got it.
Jinx, I hope that answered your question effectively. I think it did. Okay. To piggyback on Jinx's previous question, are there any tips or tricks to motivate someone to do their best, or does it all have to come from within?
Good question. We were talking about this, Marie, prior to stream, and I think this is a really cool point, is that, when we talk about motivation, I think we have to separate sometimes motivation from action. One of the things we can say is that when you have to do a thing, you don't always have to be motivated to do it. If you wait for motivation, sometimes the motivation never comes, right? So, and sometimes when we look at, do you need to have motivation to do this certain thing for yourself? Like, for example, going to the gym, or just spending some time in a hot tub at the gym, not even exercising, or doing something that's related to self-care. Sometimes not waiting for the motivation is going to be the most effective strategy. And when I was talking to Marie previous to us, kind of going live, one of the things that, we talked about is that, sometimes you go to work and you do a million things you don't want to do, and you're not motivated to do them, and yet you do them anyway. So if you think about yourself as a very important project that needs to get done, and you have some things you need to make happen, that can be one way of really kind of thinking about it a little bit differently, is not waiting for the motivation, but, kind of doing it anyway. So that's one way in which you can look at that. And I don't know if that's useful for you, but that's one strategy.
I do find that fascinating. You guys, in the question system, I will absolutely show Dr. G how to use it if she's into it. I recently figured it out. So apparently it's supposed to be used to like get people to game with you. So like people get into a queue and then they get into a game with you, right? But
Cool.
Dawn Star. Thank you very much for that one, Dot Star. Classing it up today, right in front of the fancy doctor. Thank you. But yeah, so we kind of, I repurposed it to cue something else for me. So that's all it is. Cool. Yeah. As long as you guys are happy. She really needs to hear this one. Well, it's on cooldown. I don't know why it's on cooldown. I didn't do that. Well, we don't chat too much, but we miss questions sometimes. Yeah, I mean, it's a problem. That's how this queue started. What? Yeah, I have no idea what happened there, bud. I have no idea. Okay, so I don't usually do any kind of the motivation thing. Okay, I so got myself off track. Do you guys know that I have ADHD? Have you heard of it? Have you noticed it? The motivation thing. I do often believe, and we talked about like maybe you don't have to do something at 100%, but you just try and do it. And I feel like sometimes you have to start the task for the motivation to come. Because sometimes people will say like you start eating and then you'll get hungry. Sometimes I feel like motivation works the same way.
Yeah, like I've had people where I've said, like they say, well, my laundry's piling up and I don't even have motivation to do my laundry. And I'm like, well, can you put the laundry like beside the washer? And then sometimes they'll end up saying, well, I was so close, I might as well just stick it in. Like, I mean, I was already there. So then you're almost tricking yourself to getting some things done because you'll start to see that like, it's not once you start the task, as you've said, like momentum is a whole lot easier to work with than just kind of that initial start. Once you have momentum, you're rolling, right? So, but getting that initial push or initial kickoff is the hardest part. And Laura, I did see earlier, you said you still haven't gone to the gym. We had talked about that in a previous stream, how you can push through it without motivation. And it is one of those things that it's tough and it can be intimidating too. Like you've said, if you can't do anything perfectly, you don't even want to start. And I think you have a great point in that. I think too many people are paralyzed by, this need for perfection.
Do it right or not do it at all. Yeah. And I think that that's a noble calling, and it's saying like, don't half-ass stuff. Especially if you're really passionate about something, don't go and half-ass it. And that's fair. That's more than fair. That's wonderful. But there's definitely quite a few situations in life where it's better to half-ass it than not do it at all. And we were talking about the fact that like when you're depressed, it's incredibly hard to even like brush your hair. It's hard to brush your teeth. But like, would you rather not brush your teeth at all or spend, a minute brushing your teeth? Okay, maybe it's not the required amount, but it's better than you didn't brush your teeth. Or would you rather change your clothes or not shower at all? And so if you can't shower, then changing your clothes is a great little halfway point to that. And then the motivation comes because you're slowly I don't know what it's actually called, but I call it like, it's just like a little positivity loop for you, right? Because you're saying, oh, okay, well, I did change my clothes. Or you, like you said, you might go, oh, well, my clothes are by the washer, I might as well throw them in. Or I already undressed, I might as well hop into the shower before I put on clean clothes. You don't know where that motivation is going to come from. And we have another concept here. We have another concept here called leap over it, and we created. I made it up as an alternative to fake it till you make it, because the fake it till you make it has an odd connotation with people who are depressed, because it's like, well, I do fake it. I put on a fake smile and people don't know that I'm depressed, and that feels horrible to have to like, fake that kind of thing. And so instead we say leap over it. So you're not well, you're not doing well, but just try to do the thing anyway. You can experience the anxiety, you can acknowledge it, and then you can still do whatever it is that was making you anxious. And I
love that.
Yeah. And so you leap over whatever it is. But yeah, so I think that kind of pertains to the whole motivation thing. Like you don't want to do it, but just like leap over that and just do it. I know that sounds, hi, Jeff Vader Jr. Oh, that's so awesome. Thank you so much for coming in. So that sounds like, I feel like that could sound dismissive to some people, but I truly don't think it is. I think it's a way to help ourselves not dismiss ourselves, to like acknowledge that, hey, I'm not happy with this thing, but I'm going to kick its butt and do it anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that you're absolutely right that the fake it till you make it, faking anything, especially when you're masking like an authentic person, isn't really all that healthy. Like if you're ill and you're kind of masking that illness for the other people or for whatever reason, that's not really a very healthy alternative. But you're just kind of saying, look, you accept where you're at, what's going on, and you're just going to take this leap. And I think that's a really great alternative.
Yay. Thank you. You guys heard it's doctor approved, okay? So it's official. We're gonna start running this like they do like crappy endorsements like Dr. Oz does.
I'll just stamp it, yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna stamp it. We'll be like trademark. It's a trademark concept endorsed by leading psychologists in the country.
Yeah, well, we'll make it up. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Leap over it sounds nice. I personally use fake it till you make it because I have both depression and ADHD. Hey, high five. So it's fun to figure out what's fucking me up moment to moment. Yeah, and sometimes like ADHD is a great so ADHD is literally leap over it to leap over to the other thing to leap over to the other thing. And sometimes like I will catch my brain, going like, okay, we're doing this now. We're doing this. We're doing this. Deal with it. Thank you, Dotstar. So we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, and I can't keep up with my brain. And then at one point I just have to, there are moments where I can slow everything down by going like, no, we're focusing on this one task. And that's it. I'm turning, and if that means I turn off my phone, I disconnect my internet on my computer, and I really create an environment in which I am as distraction free as possible, then that's something that like I can do. And that's a type of leaping over for ADHD. Yeah, it's leaping sideways. There you go.
Well, I think, what the strategy you mentioned is something that we often use, and it's called using time blocks, right? So you'll say, like if you have like ADHD, you can say, look, I'm going to give myself a 20-minute block where I'm going to just focus on this one thing I need to get done, and I'm going to turn off all my social, all my DMs, all my stuff. I'm going to put down all of my multiple screens. I'm going to focus on this one thing. But first, before I do that, I'm going to make sure I get out some energy. So I'm going to go for a walk or something. I'll come back. I'll focus for 20 minutes. And then I'm going to give myself permission to take another break. And go
Egg timering. Yes, the Pomodoro method.
Yes.
But sometimes that doesn't work for me. There are times where my attention span is like minutes. Right. And seconds, right? So it's like that giving myself that 5 minutes to do the one thing might not even work if my brain isn't there for those 5 minutes, right?
I think that you work up to those things. Yeah. Like I think you give yourself permission to say like, okay, I'm going to do this for like a couple minutes today, and give myself a couple of times where I'm going to do this for a couple of minutes, and then say, well, today I'm going to try to do it for 3 minutes, because it's like a muscle too. In some way.
Right.
But like you say, well, the attention difficulties are not necessarily in any way something you can necessarily control, but focus is a practice skill for anybody.
Yes.
So, when you look at our internet age, like the average person still has the attention of what they say, like a goldfish or what have you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the average person. So the person struggling with ADHD is struggling even further. So like you got to cut yourself a break and still allow yourself to say, okay, I'm going to start at a really short point, and that's okay. And there are other ways in life you could also like help to bolster that a little bit if you want.
Yeah. And Jinx, I can talk myself into doing step 1 of a task, or even the pre-steps like putting on my shoes, and then I often end up doing the full thing, and it surprises me every time. I love that. I love that. If you're kind to yourself about not managing the second step, then just do the first. If you feel okay, and you will, usually what happens is that you get that little, if you give yourself a little reward mentally, if you say like, good job, I put on my shoes. I don't even have to leave the house, but I put on my shoes. Suddenly your brain is like, ooh, what else are you going to reward me for? And you're like, well, it'd be really cool if I like went outside right now. Okay, we're going outside. Ooh, okay, so like you create this little reward system for yourself, and it builds on itself, and before you know it, you've finished the task.
Yeah, and I like to, that girl Bryce had a great suggestion. She said, sometimes I do the reverse. I give myself permission to F off for a few minutes and then like get it out of my system and try again.
Ooh,
like,
yep.
I think that's important to not like say, oh, I'm a failure, so therefore I don't try anymore. So I think that that's really cool that like you don't just dismiss that it can even happen. You say, well, I'm going to give myself permission, and then I'm going to go back again. And that often works. So that's a great strategy.
Yeah, and sometimes that's thinking of the list of things that make up to 100%. That there are so many times where I'm like, oh my God, wait, what am I doing? And then I sit down and I write out the steps of what I'm about to do. And, you know, that really sets things into where they're supposed to be. I need to shake off the idea that I can only go outside with assistance from my support workers. One step at a time, though. That's what we're saying, JJ. One step at a time.
Yeah.
It can help if you promise yourself that you don't manage further steps, you're not in any trouble. Right. It's like, so what do they say about diets, right? If you're hard on yourself for eating that cookie, you're probably more likely you're going to feel like shit and you're going to want more cookies. But if you're like, I'm going to give myself one cookie to eat and then, you know, we'll see if I want another one, I will. But I think that'll do it. I just want to get this cookie craving out of my system. And then you usually do. So it's similar to that. Okay. Oh, Jinx continued her question, but I don't usually have kind of homework. Is that unusual? Should I worry? I've been relieved that I don't have. Oh, so she's talking about her therapist, and she says that she doesn't usually get homework. Is that good or bad?
It's just different approaches. Everyone has a unique approach. You know, mine is because I tend to work from a more cognitive behavioral framework. We tend to do a lot of that kind of stuff, and so every therapist, how they're going to approach a problem might be a little bit different. That's just mine. So it doesn't mean your therapist is doing anything wrong or it's bad. It just means that they take a different approach.
Yeah. And kind of to go on top of that, I've had therapists that never assign me homework. And then my current therapist, she uses cognitive behavioral mixed with a few other things that I don't want to say. Okay. But so like once in a while I will have homework to like think about and to go through, and then other times I don't, and it just depends on what we're discussing and what's important that week or those 2 weeks. Are there any cognitive therapy games? Because there should be. Hi CMDR Victoria. Hi. Cognitive therapy. Well, I mean, have you guys seen Wobot? I've been pushing this guy. So it's an app. If you don't have an iOS device, you can get it. You use Facebook, which I don't love, but he's on Facebook Messenger too. And so you tell him. So you start the conversation by saying, "Wobot, I don't feel good today." And so he asks, "What kind of not feel good?" And then he says, like, "What's an example of a thought you've had?" And then you give him that, and then he goes, "Well, that sounds like catastrophizing to me. Here's what catastrophizing is." And so, I don't know. It's a really cool little neat app. Yeah, check it out if you haven't. It's wonderful.
I think also inherently most people don't find cognitive behavioral therapy all that fun. So I think maybe that's why it hasn't been a game just yet. But you know, it should be really challenging, and it should challenge you, really stretch you. And most of the time when we look for games, we're looking for like escape or relaxation, probably not like, you know, examining our thoughts in their most minutia kind of ways.
Yeah, and the I mean, let's be honest here. You don't go to cognitive behavioral therapy usually because you're having a fun time and you're into the idea of games, right? Like,
right.
Yeah, you're there because you got to dig through some stuff and really figure stuff out.
I wish we could make it a game. It might be a lot more popular, you know.
Yeah, well, I've been reading this book called Atomic Habits, and they talk about how the little things we do add up. So you could do a bad thing like eating a cookie, but as long as you're mostly eating good, it's still going to help you towards your long-term goal of eating healthy. Yes. Make it fun somehow. Yes, exactly that. Okay, glad to hear that. My therapist's big thing is that he's trained in DBT. I don't have borderline, but he's incorporated bits of that, and it really does seem to help me. I mean, DBT is not strictly for people with borderline. It's just, you know.
No, it's just known for that, but it does a lot of great functions. I mean, it can help with emotional dysregulation, boundaries, identity, esteem. Like, there's so many great areas it can help with to incorporate. So a lot of times people will pull and pick and choose little elements of it to integrate, and it can be really effective.
Their big shtick is that every action you do is a vote for or against what your goal is. Oh, that's fascinating.
It's interesting. I tell my clients sometimes to think about your action or your thoughts and actions as bets.
Mm.
So like, you know, like you're placing a bet, just like, and I've been reading a book around, written by a former poker player, which has made me like kind of think about this a little bit differently. But yeah, that everything that you make, you don't have all the information. So you want to place the best bet that you can, right? So when you think about how you approach life or what you're approaching in this situation, like think about the bet, like what is the outcome you want and what is going to be most likely to kind of help you out with that.
I've heard that before, and it's I don't remember what it's called, but it's like a choices system or something. But basically, you decide what your goal is, and then you always come back to that choice, the A or B, so that it helps you make decisions.
I separate those.
Yeah.
I don't think outcomes are necessarily result from good decisions.
Oh, okay.
Let's think about it this way.
Okay.
So this blew my mind when I heard it.
Let's go. Blow our minds. Yeah.
So usually we think that a good outcome means that it was a great decision, right? That the outcome turned out the way we wanted, so the decision was solid. But when you think about it, like, let's just say that someone had too much to drink and they decide they're going to drive themselves home.
Right.
Well, they made a bad decision, but the outcome was okay. They got home, they're safe, they parked their car, everything worked out. But the decision was really kind of a crap decision, and it could have put a lot of people at risk, but it worked out. So it didn't make it a good decision, right? It's sometimes we can make bad decisions with good outcomes, and we can also have good outcomes from bad decisions. Like, you could have a one-night stand and it ends up being the person you marry and is a wonderful spouse, and maybe that wasn't the best decision, but you had this amazing outcome. So there's lots of different ways in which we try to separate that, because I think sometimes people blame themselves when the outcome doesn't work out. Like when, for example, their families respond in this really negative way to them, or when they have, they have problems at work and they assume, oh, it's me, it's something I did. And sometimes it's not anything you did. Like, those outcomes and those results you get aren't always because of you. And I think not personalizing that stuff and not taking it too much to heart can really free you up to not take on so much responsibility for other people.
I absolutely love that, because like you said, it addresses that whole thing that I'll constantly do, which is, oh, this is my fault. This must be my fault. Nobody else is like this, so it must be something that I did. Wow. I love that. Do you guys love that? My brain is exploding. That's interesting, right? Okay. I like that. I have a near phobia of failure. I'd rather not try than try and fail, and I put in my best effort and the results are still poor. I feel like a huge failure. Yeah. I like this. Yeah. Outcomes are only partly influenced by your actions and partly by a lot of outside. That's a really also a good point. Like that, again, going back to that drunk driving, the fact that he got home in one piece might have been there was less people on the road circumstantially, right? Maybe his house wasn't really too far from where he was driving to, so it's just less likely that you're going to get into an accident.
It may be that the stoplight was green, and that's a bit of luck. Like, you didn't have to stop, and the traffic was just flowing. Yeah. So there's a lot of luck involved in outcomes too, and as well as external factors. And I think we don't give enough credit to sometimes bad luck or good luck or just not being your day. And one thing we know about people that are people who are happy is that, and this sounds kind of dysfunctional, but they often take credit for the good things, and when the bad things happen, they put it outside themselves. So they say, well, like, for example, if they did well on a test, they go, well, I studied well, I'm really smart, I was really well prepared, I'm really good at this subject. Yeah. But if they fail, they're like, well, that test was really hard. The teacher was kind of not clear. So they're putting that responsibility elsewhere. And if they're not really taking it on themselves. And the thing about depression is oftentimes they're the most realistic people. So they'll say, well, it was me. I didn't study hard enough, or I'm not really good at this subject sometimes. And maybe that's not even true, but they'll take on a lot of burdens that aren't really theirs to bear. Whereas the average person who's happy actually has a lot of thoughts that, by other people's viewing wouldn't be seen as realistic or even necessarily good. Like, most people who are happy overestimate how attractive they are. They overestimate how smart they are. If you give like a test, and I used to do this, I was a professor at one point, I used to pass out note cards, and I'd say, I want you to write down whether you think you are lower than average intelligence, or above average when you look around this room. Most people would say they're above average. And that always blew my mind, because statistically, you're probably average. Right. And that if you're at school, you're, there was hardly anybody. Usually a couple people would say they're below average. And you could always tell, because they felt badly about themselves. Those are the people that struggled. But sometimes I'd have students who really weren't doing well in class, who thought they were above average and fantastic and, healthy self-esteem. Can't blame it. So I had nothing bad to say about that.
Huh. Sea Blossom, I want to get to your question, but I want to also ask really quick. So Dawnstar pointed here, and because she's a beloved mod, I want to make sure that we address that. She pointed out that she's scared of CBT. Can you address that maybe in any way?
Sure. And I want to know a little bit about like what scares you about it, because I think that, you know, for a lot of people, therapy in general, I think it threatens to shake up your world a little bit. Like, not that people are comfortable in depression, but it's like the devil they know, you know?
No,
like,
and it's the reason why taking medication is so hard, because you're
Absolutely.
like, well, I don't know, this makes me feel funny, and the feel funny is you just feel good and you feel better and you feel more like yourself. But yeah,
right. And I think that like any form of therapy, including CBT, I think I see a dog in there. That was great.
Hi, Brittany. Hi. Thank you for joining.
With CBT, it really, I think, threatens to challenge the way in which you're thinking and really meets you where you're at. And I can understand why that would be kind of scary. But I would encourage you to like take that risk if that's something you're considering, because it can really, I mean, there's nothing that it's not going to do any damage, right?
Right.
It's not going to be worse. So the only place this could really go is that you stay the same, which is a fear that a lot of people have, that they're going to go to therapy and like nothing's going to help. They're beyond help. I hear that a lot. Or maybe the fear is that I'm going to be a little different, or I'll have to look at things I don't want to look at, or maybe I'll even be better and I won't kind of understand how to navigate that world. And because you kind of know how to navigate it now, and it threatens that in some ways. So I get it.
Well, and Dawnstar is saying, I'm not a fan of digging deep into trauma. Going through it once was hard enough. And we talked about this on the show before. By going through it with a therapist, you're going through it in a controlled environment, and you're saying, hey, trauma, I got you. This is how I'm framing you. This is how I'm going to figure out how I feel about you so that you don't have control. Otherwise, trauma takes control over you. And if it's enough that it influences your current decisions, and it might stop you from doing certain things, like certain traumatic experiences will stop you from maybe doing something incredible in the future, like that's trauma controlling you. Going into a CBT session and opening that up on your own terms is you controlling the trauma. And so that's why I think like it's not easy, but the outcome, the benefits outweigh the difficulty.
I think too that CBT is a therapy that isn't known for going too deep and staying too long in the past. Usually they reference the past as a way to understand where you're at now. But if you go to a therapist who's pretty strict CBT, they don't let you stay in the past very long for a number of reasons. One is that, it can be traumatizing, and it can put you in a mindset that isn't useful today. Like it takes you back to a time when maybe you felt helpless or in a different place. So
that was, sorry to interrupt you, but that was actually what ended up happening to me, where several times I'd be like, I want to talk about this. And my therapist would be like, why don't we just table that, because you're not in the best place to discuss that right now. And sorry.
And that's a great example, because your therapist can really moderate that experience for you. So you don't have to be like thrown into the pits of like the past. That's not the way it's usually done. So the way it's typically done is like, and also you have a conversation around it, to where you can say, look, this is uncomfortable for me. No one's going to really push you beyond what you can do. And also you don't spend, as I said, a lot of time there. So it's used to kind of reference things, but for most of the theoretical orientation of CBT really is like looking at the adult who is now. Like the past has occurred, but it is done. There's nothing we can do to change that. You can reframe it, you can rewrite the narrative, you can do some of that stuff, but we're going to look at the adult who is sitting before us today. What is really challenging your functional ability today? What are the thoughts that are hurting you today? And like, let's work with those. Let's work with the adult before us, not the person who's in the past. So that's kind of really more of the orientation of CBT. If you go with somebody who's more kind of strictly in that framework, and then if you have other trauma things they're going to address, like maybe through EMDR or DBT or some other things, that's a different story. But with just CBT, that's kind of what you're looking at. So it's going to be kind of like dipping your toes in, but it's not going to be jumping in the pool most of the time.
I'm gonna scroll up a little bit so we can catch what people have been saying. Alora, I laughed the first time, said, I might be a perfectionist because I don't succeed at much, but I don't succeed often because I'm too terrified of trying. That's actually funny. if I'm not automatically good at something, I end up giving up, says Miss Park. Yeah, there you go.
We talked about that too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
About yeah.
I tend to minimize those times when I do succeed. Like if I take out the trash and it's not like good job, it's more like, I really should do that more often. And so then I feel worse instead of giving yourself that compliment. Yeah. I do the same. The fear of failure or thought that I'm not good enough anyway, so why bother trying is common. Yeah, I understand that, Tori. Absolutely. Yeah. Why do we have, but why do we have to do it? I mean, that's part of the therapy, and that I hope that Dr. G explained that, because that's not like necessarily a given. Like you're gonna do CBT and you're gonna they're gonna sit you down and immediately you're gonna relive all of your trauma. Yeah. That's so far away from what it is, and you're not going to be in a place where you're like slapped with your past all of a sudden. Like that's not how that's not any therapist that I've ever worked with has never been like, now we're talking about this. Like it's you do lead the discussion, you lead the conversation.
Right. Well, the other thing too is to remember that like we work for you. I mean, I think sometimes people forget that. Like, you know, if you have a concern from the gate, like out of the gate, talk about it. Like sometimes people are really like, people are so eager to be the good patient that they don't say some of these things that like they really want to say. Like write down before you go to therapy, if you have some concerns or some things, questions you have.
I have a whole notebook. Yeah.
Write them down on a piece of paper. And when you go in there, say, you know, I'm really nervous. This is my first session. These are some of the things I was concerned about. So I wanted to write them down and see what your thoughts were. And like, if you have somebody who's like, yeah, I'm definitely throwing you into your past, like, don't see that. Like that isn't the person.
Don't go to that therapist.
Yeah. Like, but you have choice. You have the ability to kind of state what your fears are, and don't feel like you aren't a part of that conversation. Like therapists don't just tell you what to do. Yeah. They help you, you know, kind of navigate your own stuff. Yeah. So be sure that you have that conversation. And like I said, like, I think a lot of times what I love to see is like when people first come into therapy, they want to be such a good client that they don't say anything they think might be off-putting or controversial or rile you up. And I love it when I have clients like 6 months down the road and they're like, you know, I had a client who like slouched in a chair and was like, you know, I had a one night stand and I know I should tell you I feel terrible, but I feel amazing. Yeah. Like, I knew that person was like being honest with me. Right. That's the point I want to get to. And that's what everybody wants. They want you to be like totally upfront. So even if that's like concerns you have or like things you're not really sure about, I would tell them, like, be upfront about it.
Rally of Sunshine says, I think some of the problems people have with medication, specifically for depression, that they start affecting you physically before they make you feel better mentally. I mean, that can happen, and that's why not everything is for everybody. Not every medication will work for everybody. It's another reason why not to ask your grandpa if you should be taking something.
It's also a good reason to talk to your doctor, because with some of those medications, those may pass, and with other ones, they're a symptom to be concerned about. So if you talk to your doctor, you'll kind of know what to expect moving forward.
Mm-hmm. CMDR Victoria says CBT and trauma aren't necessarily the best fit too. Depends on the person.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, that's all I have to say about that, Dr. G too. Just true. I can't relate to the low self-esteem, though I do have fun with self-depreciation, but I find it fascinating that at the end of the day, the behavior for depression and schizophrenia can be so similar. Yeah, JJ, that's a great point. I can see how it's intimidating for certain objects for Dawnstar. Yes, absolutely, that girl Bryce. You're totally right. Darkest Timeline, welcome in. I know it's been a few minutes, but I hope you're still here. I appreciate you being here, even though you did pick an odd moment to pop in. That girl Bryce, I was recounting something traumatic once to my therapist and reminded me to breathe, and I didn't even realize I was headed towards a flashback and my breathing was erratic. So Dr. Gurner is right. They help guide you. Yeah. The crux of my disorder at the moment is avolition apathy with a lot of asociality and adonia. Similar to depression, I guess. I don't get the psychomotor disturbances of the poverty of speech at the moment, though I do get catatonic at times. This might help people. I saw it and was odd, and I pinned it for later. When thinking about life, remember this: no amount of guilt can solve the past, and no amount of anxiety can change the future. I do love that, and I have referred to that in the past.
Yes, anxiety is often around like control, like, you know, like if you're, as long as you're holding on to it, that nothing can really, you know, surprise you or you're prepared.
Yeah. Amos, I hope you had a wonderful night. I think she's already hopped off, but I appreciate you being here. I had a teacher whose favorite quote was, "Be friendly with what is. All you have to do is, all you have is this present moment." And that always stuck with me. Yeah, so tomorrow we're going to be talking about mindfulness. You guys have kind of transitioned us really nicely into that topic. So I want to discuss mindfulness and what that means and what it doesn't mean, because there's a lot of misunderstanding around it. This is so relevant for me. I've been seeing the same people for PTSD therapy for over a year. They agree I need EMDR, but I can't offer it. I reached a point that my current therapist where we seem to be unable to get CBT working. He spends a lot of time talking me down. I feel like there's something wrong with me as a patient, that everyone in the clinic loves him otherwise.
That's fascinating. Like the thing is, just because everyone else loves him doesn't mean it's a good fit for you. So like, I think that you have to be confident. I think one of the things sometimes is that people aren't confident in their own judgment and opinions. And part of kind of knowing yourself and kind of being okay with who you are is knowing what works for you and what doesn't, and being able to kind of verbalize that and being confident about it. Not everybody's going to be great for everybody, and that's okay. Like if there's difficulties or, you're not feeling like that's a great fit. One of the best pieces of advice I've ever been given was when I first started working at this prison that I referenced earlier. And I was working at it was like a supermax. It was a level 5 facility.
Wow.
And there was this older psychiatrist gentleman, and he was a concentration camp survivor. He's an amazing man. But he told me, as I was this like younger girl, I'm in this prison setting, and everything is about safety. So there really wasn't a need for me to be concerned. But he said, you know what, Julie, he's like, always listen to your gut. Even if no one else believes you, no one else agrees with you, even if you feel dumb for like even bringing it up. He's like, I want you to know that you can talk to me and I'm going to believe you and we're going to go with it. So if you don't feel safe, even if the guy's like in, hand and wrist shackles, even if everything is guaranteed safe, if you don't feel right about it, it's not right. Walk away. Like, so I thought that was a really great testament to, kind of really beginning that process of listening to your inner voice and like going with it and trusting yourself. I think too many people make a lot of bad mistakes by not trusting themselves. They talk themselves into relationships that aren't right. They talk themselves into, seeing doctors who might not be right for them. They talk themselves into staying in jobs that are mistreating them.
Yeah.
Like we do a lot of ways in which we compromise that voice. And, listening to your gut is great. It sounds simple, but in every area of life, it helps. So I challenge you to try to do that. It's not always easy.
I want to kind of add to that. At one point, so I've had two kind of big breakdowns in my life. And one of the ones I had was because I was in a job that was making me absolutely miserable. And the one thing I did not believe, would not let myself believe, was that I was absolutely miserable because of my job. I was like, everything else is wrong, but my job can't be it. I can't be miserable because of my work. I can't be miserable because my boss is shitty. Nope, that's not it. I should be resilient. I should be able to handle this. And so the fact that I can't, that's why I'm depressed. That's why I feel shitty. And then I ended up like daily crying we had like a color and like X-Acto knife kind of. That sounds a lot scarier than it is. It was like the design room for all intents and purposes. Yeah, but I would like go there, lock myself in, and then just like cry hysterically. And quite a few times I would end up like calling my doctor, and she'd be like, "You have to go home," and I'd be like, "I can't go home." Poor doctor. I'm still with that therapist. She's been through a lot with me. But my point is like I learned the very, very hard way to trust my gut, that my gut had a lot to say that was really, that I wasn't listening to just due to my own stubbornness and like fear. Honestly, it was fear more than anything. Because
there's a lot. I had someone who told me that they knew they were marrying the wrong person as they were walking down the aisle.
Oh,
man, that is the opposite of what you want to be experiencing on your wedding day. And they were like, but I knew it was the right thing to do, and that,
it's not
justification. And, that marriage ended 10 years later. It ended up not being a very good marriage, but like to be able to look back on your wedding day and say, like, I knew in my gut this was bad. I think we have a lot of those moments that we end up pushing through, and they're never positive at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe other people have positive experiences with that, but I certainly haven't. When I haven't listened to my gut, things don't go well. And when I have, they really have. But I noticed that was a really good piece of advice that I've used personally, professionally, with clients, with business deals. I mean, it has always kind of worked out for me in that way.
Yeah. See, Blossom, my therapist was at my wedding. That's how. I absolutely love my therapist, so I get the whole 11 years for now. Yeah.
I've never been invited to a wedding.
No? Well, that's well, she at one point also saw my husband, like, separately. And I think, that was, I don't think I would have gotten to a point where I could get married if it wasn't for her. And so
what a great thing for her to be a part of, like, to just see. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But a little jealous.
Okay. I want to make sure. I've been in therapy with the same person for 4 years, but I was dumped by one therapist and dumped two myself before finding them. It takes the right time. It takes time to find the right person for you. Miss Park, absolutely 100%. Sith Panda, I've been very quiet tonight, but the conversation is fantastic. Before it's too late, I want to thank you for having Dr. Gurner on and Dr. Gurner for coming. I really appreciate the time you both took to speak today.
Thank you. That is really kind. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you saying that.
Thank you. Darkest Timeline. Thank you, Dr. Gurner and Mxiety. I do need to find that confidence that lets me trust those feelings. I'm doing much better now, but at my worst, I had an issue with auditory hallucinations, and I've had a really, really difficult time trusting my gut ever since. Everything you're saying about being ruled by obligation makes sense. I understand that in the sense of, like, I've learned, and this kind of was a little bit confusing in the beginning, but I've learned that, like, your thoughts are not law. Just because you thought something doesn't mean it's necessarily true. And for a while, that kind of shook my world to the point of, like, well, what am I thinking that is true? What is right at all? If my thoughts aren't right, like, that's the thing I thought I had to depend on.
Right. And with auditory hallucinations, I can understand because your thoughts are, you're almost learning to distrust your own body. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so, you have to be able to separate and say, these are a symptom. The other thing is me. Like there are symptoms and there are selves, like there's the self. And I think that, like, when you're able to say, okay, this is a symptom, this is not necessarily representative of the fact that I can't trust myself, that you are more than kind of just the symptoms that you experience. And when you get a feeling about something, learning to kind of differentiate, and the more you learn about your symptoms and how they manifest, the more you'll be able to say, okay, that's a symptom, and you can almost trust yourself a bit more with identifying your symptoms, and then learn to trust yourself more with having confidence that what you believe and in your gut is something you should follow.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's the worst. I should be able to handle this. It's sometimes hard to say that depression and the other mental disorders have nothing to do with your ability to handle things on your strength. It's not a fault in your care. Well, when you believe, and I did at the time believe, that depression was the main fault in my character, it was responsible for everything. My past, my trauma, was responsible for anything that was going wrong in my life then was because of the depression and the trauma that I had experienced. And so everything kind of revolved around that. So because I couldn't trust myself and I couldn't trust my thoughts, because some of them were flashbacks, very similarly to what your Darkest is describing, it was a lot easier for me to take that reality of being at my job and knowing that I disliked it and just completely ignoring that and throwing it out of the picture by saying, socially, it's also more enforced that something's wrong with you if you have a mental illness. Right. So it was very easy, like everything was set up for me to be, this is my fault because I have a mental illness. It's not because of anything else that's going on. It was a very long way to get to that very short point. Women are especially, go ahead.
I was going to say the media reinforces that point as well. I mean, all the time we hear, this happened, and then we hear, well, is the person mentally ill? Is the person have this? One of the things that we forget is that, you can have a mental illness and have an action that has nothing to do with that illness. So that's really important to remember as well, is that, a lot of the media is very uninformed about a number of different subjects, and don't always take whatever you read or a kind of common social sentiment and like apply it to yourself and feel badly about those things.
Absolutely. Do you want me to add Discord questions to the queue? I don't know if we have enough time, but yes. Sorry you missed so much. Yeah, Peregrine, hi. Bye. Getting home from work, only enough time to catch a little bit is better than nothing, huh? That's a great example of that. I think that all the ones that are left are mine. Well, absolutely, I promise. Sea Blossom says I would totally invite him to my wedding. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so there are a few, but they're not like super, and I think very much, Dr. Gurner can get to them. Oh, and they're relevant. So I'll ask you the two questions together and we see how it goes. Cool. Is it easy or hard to discern whether it's distorted thoughts causing problems or medication is necessary? When speaking about medication with a patient, what works best, waiting for them to bring it up or suggesting it yourself?
Well, like to me, I'm a very concerned, the way in which your therapist is going to approach this is always individual. For me, I'm a kind of a conservative, when I say conservative provider, I mean that like, I will always try to do the thing without medication first. Mm-hmm. So like, we'll start off, and I tell people, if you don't notice any symptom changes in 3 months, the first 3 months, you don't notice anything feeling better, you've made no progress, that's concerning for me. That's a red flag. So that's the standard I set for myself. So for me, like, I do think that, that conversation around medication is something I'm happy to bring up, because I'll just look for ways in which we can help you along. So if we're going and it's been 3 months and you're not feeling any different, there's no difference at all in the way that you're thinking or processing, you're still struggling a lot at home and in a lot of pain, still experiencing a high intensity of symptoms, then I'll probably say, look, there's a number of ways we can go about this that we might try. We can try to go, and I'll usually let you, obviously you can make that decision. I always make the client know that you have the ultimate power to make decisions about your care. I'm never going to put that onto you. So I'll give you choices and I'll say, look, at the 3 month mark, this is where I hope, if you're not experiencing any difference, we might consider to look at, do you want to try another couple months before we talk more about medication? Or do you feel like it's really at a point where you just can't tolerate this anymore? And maybe I'll refer you to a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist who, can give you an honest evaluation of some medications that might be useful. So I always try a conservative approach where I'm going to try therapy first and see kind of how we can manage things without it. And then at a certain point, we'll say, well, this may really be beneficial. Or sometimes we'll hit a plateau and I'll say, look, it's been a while and things really haven't changed. Is this something that you'd be interested in? So I always put the ball in your court, but it is something that I'm happy to bring up. I don't wait for clients to bring that up. I don't expect you to be the expert in your own care or you wouldn't be coming to me. So that's how I see it.
Where Bryce is coming from is that as soon as she mentioned that maybe my depression was more chemical of an imbalance, she agreed so fast that my head was still sort of spinning over it. So
everyone's depression is chemical. I mean, that's the
right.
Yeah, is that so? Whether or not you need medication doesn't mean your depression is more chemical than somebody who doesn't use medication. In fact, if you look at, and you could Google this, by the way, if you look at images of the brain before and after CBT dealing with depression, you'll see that the brain literally functions differently before and after that therapy, whether or not medication is ever taken. So, when that therapy is effective, your brain does definitely function differently. How you process information is different. It's a chemical imbalance either way. But when your doctor's referencing that, what they're kind of saying is they feel as though, or maybe they feel as though, you may benefit from some additional kind of supplementation on that route. Therapy is not going to be as effective for everyone. And I think that we have to consider that in kind of individual treatment. So it's not a failing on your part. Individual biology is what it is. Some people are going to be more responsive, some people are not, and some people are going to make quicker progress and some won't, just like some will need meds and some won't. So don't consider that I have a more severe form because it is chemical. Everyone's is chemical. It's just how we move forward with that.
Yeah. And I think, your doctor was probably aware of it, but they, it's not that they waited for you to say something. It's just that they wanted to make sure that you were prepared for it. And once you were, it was clear that you were, they had that discussion with you. You don't know if you don't know if they might have brought it up in your next session anyway, Last question, promise.
Okay.
Evelyn, hi, sunshine. I'm not sure if you talked much about this because I came in late, but have you dealt with clients with extreme body dysmorphia that didn't have an eating disorder? It has a lasting effect on mental health issues with so many people. You go through cycles of depression, anxiety, but at the end of the day, you can't get away from your own body. How do you deal with dysmorphia or trick your brain into changing the way you perceive yourself?
Well, I'll be very frank with you. The times I've seen body dysmorphia without an eating disorder has actually been with bodybuilders. So I've seen men often who are overlooked for body dysmorphia.
In general,
really show kind of like signs and symptoms of that. But I will be really frank with you. Any kind of eating disorder is a really specialty area of treatment. And so for me, because eating disorders can be in some areas very lethal, and also because they require such specialization in their skills, I always refer anyone with dysmorphia or eating disorders to specialty eating disorder treatment centers. They're best able to deal with that kind of dysmorphia as well as any kind of, eating issues if there are any. But with that dysmorphia, it can be really challenging if there aren't like co-occurring eating issues because it's a matter of perception. So it's addressing that perceptive issue. So I allow people who have a specialty in looking at, dysmorphia, whether it's anorexia or others. The challenge is, though, oftentimes finding that kind of specialty treatment that men will feel comfortable in, because it's primarily a female environment, and it's often not a place that a lot of guys feel as comfortable. Like if you go to an eating disorder group, it's like 99% women, if not 100% women, aside from you. So, I think that that was my primary challenge, honestly. But I always speak with a specialist around that.
Hi, Scaramouche Boy, and hi, Evelyn. Exactly. Okay, got it. Cool. That helped. Would you consider the strictness of a bodybuilder's diet an eating disorder, though?
I consider it really is dysfunctional patterns of eating, and it does attract people. A lot of these like fitness competitions attract people who have histories of eating issues. And they also do promote very unhealthy eating habits. No doubt about it. The way in which they're supposed to, diet down to get such a minimal amount of body fat, the attention and meticulous detail that people pay to their bodies and being examined and judged. And it is a really toxic environment for someone who, especially if they have a history of an eating problem. It's not something I'd recommend. Saying that, it is how some individuals end up kind of shifting their disorder into something they see as like healthier. And because they're surrounded by people who are also participating in this behavior and cheered for it and get medals for it, they assume that like it's still okay. But sometimes what we forget is that, you can be doing something that's very unhealthy for you in a sea of people who are not doing something unhealthy for them. So it's, like kind of like the runner who has a really severe eating disorder in a team of very thin girls who may not really struggle so much with that eating disorder, but may kind of be participating in different ways. So yeah, I definitely think those patterns of eating are dysfunctional. Somebody that I know does bodybuilding, is a woman, and after a competition would literally eat an entire pizza, like a huge, like unbelievable amount of food, very unhealthy. Just because she'd been so deprived. And you think about the patterns in which they go through, incredibly unhealthy. But at the same time, it's a sport, and you could say that about, wrestlers who diet down and others who have to make weight, and they do some really unhealthy stuff for cuts, cutting their weight and stuff like that. So it's all about how you go about it that can make it healthy or unhealthy.
I hope that answered your question. Darkest timeline. I feel that I'm in denial about dysmorphia, not mentioning to my therapist. Is that one of those trust your gut moments? Yes, absolutely. Yes. If you're wondering about it, it's a do it. I wanted to say thank you to the beautiful ornithologists who are visiting us. Damien Explorers, thank you so much for the raid. Thank you for bringing your wonderful community over here. TKF love. VK, thank you so much for the sub. 16 months. Oh, my sunshine. Thank you. Zetman, thank you, everybody. Welcome in. I love you all so much. Yes, thank you. Also, introducing hormones into your body does not help. Yeah, 11th, absolutely it doesn't. Thank you so much for shouting out, VK, Dawnstar. Oh my goodness. So I'm gonna stay on for like another hot 15 minutes because you guys did such a wonderful. I just wanted to thank you all for being here and coming in, and I don't want to immediately shut off. You guys just got here, but Dr. Gurner, you have been absolutely incredible. You guys, if you're not following her, please follow her right away on all the social media platforms, including Twitch. That's where you can ask her more questions, and she's been so supportive of this channel, of what we're trying to do, and it's just, yeah, it's been an honor, honestly. I appreciate having you so much. Thank you for giving us your time.
Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it, and best of luck, and I hope that I can be here as a viewer in the future. So have a great day, and thanks again. You're a wonderful person. It's been a pleasure getting to know you.
Thank you. I'm a wonderful person. Have you seen yourself?
Have a great day. Thank you guys. Thank you, people in chat, and I really appreciate your audience is amazing.
I know, they're wonderful.
You are lucky, and they're great people. And thank you to those in my stream who joined us today for this duration of time. Usually I'm only on for an hour, so they put up a lot to
they did, and I appreciate. Oh my gosh, but I told you 2 hours, huh? Just flew. Yeah.
Have a lovely evening and take care. Thanks again.
Bye. Thank you so much.